be in Lethbridge today. I was watching a TEDx talk on the way out, to tell you the truth, and this is a lot funnier from her. She was about a 60-year-old dairy farmer in Ontario talking about why we should be passionate about agriculture. She started her speech out probably the best I've ever heard. In the top two most important things in the world, right? The first thing is having sex, because it ensures the continuity of the species. And then agriculture has to feed it, fuel it, and put clothes on it so it can have sex again. Right? I thought it was fantastic. So I'm starting out with homework. Everyone got a piece of paper at their table. Grab your pen. Write action list at the top. When I was at Texas A&M taking TPAP, a prof out of Purdue by the name of Mike Bolge likes to scream at you when you don't listen to him, said, you need to learn something from everybody, right? Some of the most important facts I've learned about HR was talking to a Subway franchisee on an airplane. In agriculture, we like to complain and say we're so different because Mother Nature can screw us. You try owning a resort in Mexico. Tell me if Mother Nature affects them, right? You learn something from everybody, action list at the top of the paper. At the end of the talk, if you haven't wrote down anything, it's your fault because you didn't learn anything. And if there's too much, well then it's my fault. So he said there's an auction at the side. This presentation is going to be kind of like an auction. I usually do it in a little bit longer time, but we'll go through TPAP and Danny Kleinfelter, because Danny actually used some of my slides in a 5% rule when he was touring Alberta last year, so some of it might be a review, and he's obviously a key part to this. We'll outline the 5% rule. We'll talk about why it's important. I'm going to give a 5-minute talk on why I think accrual farm financial statements are important and how we should look at them. And then the fun parts at the end, we're going to brainstorm on how to be 5% better. So obviously TPAP, I would recommend it to, especially producers, but also industry in the room to look at it. It's out of Texas A&M. It's basically a master's program for farm managers. It's 1 week, 2 years in a row. Once you pass it or put in your time, you get to be part of Apex, 4-day meeting once a year with what I would call the most progressive minds in agriculture in the world. Why I think it's important is I think all farm managers need to move to the theory of a CEO, and TPAP literally outlines the 7 things that I think a farm CEO should focus on the most. And they do it in a simple way. So the first one is, Jack Welch was the old CEO of General Electric, and he talks about a true competitive advantage. We all want that for our businesses, don't we? Well, the only true competitive advantage is to learn, adapt, and change faster than your competition. Because if you're a 60-mile-an-hour train and the train behind you is going 80, you're still losing, right? When we get up in the morning, we should be looking at our cost structures, how to increase productivity, how to drop costs, and the only thing we should be worried about is a farmer in Ukraine got up 9 hours before us and is beating us, right? Second thing, strategic management. Wayne Gretzky explains it the best. He got asked in an interview one time, why are you the best player in the NHL? Obviously, we all know Wayne's pretty modest. He says, I'm not bigger, I'm not faster, I'm not better. I just do one thing different. While everybody else is going to the mob where the puck is, I just go to where the puck's going to be. So I'm 3 steps ahead. So how many producers in the room actually spend time in the winter drawing a plan of here's where we think agriculture is going in the next 3 to 5 years, and here's how I'm going to be first to get there. Or maybe we don't like the bleeding edge, just the leading edge, so maybe you want to be 3rd or 4th to get there instead of 1,000th, right? Analyzing. So you not only need to analyze what to do on your farm, but what not to do, because they both obviously take up time and money. A good example of this, if you've read the book Good to Great, great. If you haven't, read it. Darwin Kells was the CEO of Kimberly-Clark in the 1970s. Kimberly-Clark was producing newspapers. That was their main business. He convinced his board to close every paper mill and put all of their efforts into consumer goods, the main one being Kleenex. So you got to remember, their biggest margin, they were very profitable, was newspapers in the 1970s, and he convinced them to change direction. Now, do you think his timing and his analyzation was pretty good? Right? Newspapers are working their way to extinct, and Kleenex and consumer goods have went through the roof. We have to be a learning organization. So basically, what we need to do is always continuously learn to be better, right? We have to understand that someone somewhere in the world is kicking our ass at what we do. So we can't get up in the morning and think, hey, we're pretty good at this, because someone's beating us. So this one ties together with the next point of a continuous management improvement. Farm management is the key to farm success. It's not actually where the donkey died, i.e. the dirt or the Mother Nature, because averages will weigh that out. If you could make way more money farming on one individual piece of dirt, we'd all move there. So in the history of averages, on a 100-year average, it's pretty normal. So farm management is the key differentiator. So if we realize that somebody somewhere is doing everything better than us, right, then the key is to drive into our organizations the theory that we have to find it, learn it, adapt to it, and teach everybody on the farm, right? How many times have we had 2 or 3 combines running or 4 pieces of equipment, and at the end of the day, you stop for supper and your one employee or your one team member says, hey, I found this new setting on the combine. I'm going a half mile faster. The sample looks better. I'm not throwing anything over. Well, that's awesome. Did you tell the other 3 drivers? Well, no, because he wants his own back rubbed, right? Well, I want to rub your back, but please tell everybody, right? Timing. So the only difference between the top 10% of producers and the rest of producers is simple timing. When do we get into crops? When do we get out of crops? When do we expand? When do we contract? How do we change our marketing? Do we go into a new niche? Timing. Lastly, the future really does belong to those producers who realize and capture the opportunities before they become mainstream. And I call it producers, but it's really any small business person, any team member, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in. There is a ton of opportunities, especially in agriculture. Our job is to find them, capture them, and employ them before anybody else does. The 5% rule is pretty simple. So we went through these 7 keys that I feel farm managers should be working towards. So how can we break that down into simple, logical steps in order to show more profit on our financial statements? What I'm talking about here, my very last slide, I'll re-put it. I have a definition of legacy. It basically means that I want to leave our farm, the dirt and the financial statements, in a better position than when I took it over. And I would actually, based on some of the happenings in the last 36 months, I would also say that it's our job as producers to get more into policy and industry to help so that hopefully that is in a better position by the time we're finished than when we started, right? So that's part of the reason I'm fairly profit focused, right? Is that it's part of the legacy on a long-term plan. So the 5% rule is most easily explained through a baseball analogy. Anyone like baseball? Everyone's hand stuck to their hip. I don't believe that nobody can lift up their hand. Okay. What's the difference between a 300 and a 250 batting average? So this is Derek Jeter, Hall of Fame, All-Star team every year, paid about $9 million plus a season, right? Versus the guy that got traded 7 times, never won the World Series, virtually a nobody, positional player. All that Derek Jeter did different is he hit one more ball every 20 times he went to the plate. That's all 5% is. He just did it over and over and over and over, right? So we're going to break that down in a farm in that if I told you guys that 5% in a farm was 2 bushels of canola, I use a canola example, sell it for 50 cents higher and tighten up your cost by $17 an acre. So that's cents per bushel. That's all 5% is. So how many people in the room think you could grow 2 more bushels if you're a little more proactive and focused on perfection? A little bit of education on marketing, we might be able to capture 50 cents, and we could find a way to tighten our cost by 17 bucks. Those seem pretty attainable, correct? It's not like some snake oil is going to get us 200 bushels or 15 bushels an acre. It's little increments. Kleinfelter and Cole have both done studies in the US basically showing that the top 25% of farms really are only 5% better than the average. The kicker is that today's number's 5% is a big number, and we'll go through that. And David Cole did the same thing. The top 20% net income was significantly more than the average or bottom 20%. And I think at the speed of change in agriculture and the speed of change in management, we would probably argue that that gap is widening even faster. So as we said, I'm a numbers junkie, so I can say nerd. I'm an accountant. Your base case in Western Canada, plus or minus where your farm is, 40 bushel canola, $10, because I suck at math and that's easy. Inputs, $180, so we're going to call that fert, seed, and chemical. And fixed costs of $170 an acre, so you got $350 break-evens. Net income of 50 bucks. That's the goal, right? And as I said, depending on where you are, you can adjust it to your area. The majority of fixed costs is what we call labor, power, and machinery, and we'll talk about that. Here's 5% changes to show you how simple. So as I said, 2 bushels, 50 cents, $17 in cost savings. So if you look at the slide there, the base case is our little graph of we're making $50 an acre. Go over 2, yield is up 2 bushels an acre. On that same plan, we now make $70 an acre. Go over a couple more. If you do 2 bushels and 50 cents, you now make $91 instead of 50. And oh, by the way, if you find a way to have 2 more bushels, 50 more cents a bushel, and tighten up your cost by $17 an acre, you make $108.50 while your neighbor's making 50. And I'm a big proponent of inputs, so I'm not saying tighten up your input cost by 17 bucks. Because in my opinion, decreasing fertilizer, seed, and chemical decreases your cost per acre and increases your cost per bushel because your yield goes down, right? What I'm saying is there's ways such as sectional control that you could use less inputs and grow as much grain. There's ways such as 24-hour shifts on your equipment that you could save $6, $7 an acre in fixed costs on 10,000 acres. It's $70,000. So there's lots of different ways we're going to discuss. And the funny thing is when I used to be at M&P, we talk about financial statements and people would say, well, you know, I've got a comfortable life. I don't mind 50 bucks an acre. I don't really want to try too hard. You just ask them, sorry, ladies in the crowd. Okay, Bob, for the next 90 days, make me a promise. What's that? We'll make the assumption Bob's a 10,000 acre farm. For the next 90 days, I want you to roll over first thing in the morning and tell your wife. You know Jim down the road farms the same amount of acres as us? Yeah. Yeah, he's making $585,000 more than we are. Every year. And just tell me how many days into the 90 days before it becomes an important discussion and you care about it, right? And I'm not saying you have to work harder to make $585,000. That's part of what we have to fix. In agriculture, we think more acres means more work. No, it just means we need to delegate and actually create a management system, right? I'm just saying you need to focus on perfection because it's unattainable, but if we fall flat at perfection, we might still hit excellent, right? Settle for great, not for good. To break it into equity, so if you did the 5% rule for 5 years, did all 3 of those things, base case versus doing all 3 things, so 50 to 108.50, the change in equity, your equity would go up $293 an acre if you were just farming average, and if you implemented all 3 changes, your equity would go up by $636 an acre. Now as farmers, we like to break things down by acre and by bushel because it makes the number sound smaller, we have less risk that way, right? So let's take it out to the big numbers. 4,000 acre farm, that means in 5 years, the difference in equity is $2.5 million versus $1.1 million. How many people in this room took over the farm from their dad and hope that their son or their daughter takes it over from them and your farm's a legacy never ends in its entire life, right? It's just a living organism that farms forever. This is 5 years I'm talking about. And we're talking about businesses we want to live for 100, 150, 200, 300, 400 years, right? So I don't know what 1.4 million on a 4,000 acre farm that's multiplied every 5 years does in 100 years. I haven't done that math. I just know it's a lot. Why do I think 5% is important? As I mentioned, I chair the board at Global Ag Risk, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on why I feel it's important. But we pulled some data pulled some data to prove why we think inputs increases our productivity and our net revenue, right? And basically it showed on 150 farm cross-reference that for every dollar we put in inputs, we get about $1.75 back in revenue. So 75 cents go straight to margin to pay all your fixed costs. Now, nobody go home and tell everybody that I said go put more of 3517. Like, I'm talking about good, solid agronomy, right place, right time, right source. There's a direct correlation between the proper use of inputs and gross revenue, which then ties directly to gross margin. The issue is as you use more inputs, you also have more risk, right? How many farmers would like to make more money? Everyone's arms stuck, but I'll guarantee everybody. How many farmers would like to have less risk? I'm going to make the assumption everyone will put their hand up to that too. Make more money, have less risk. I'd like a unicorn, right? So here's another example of some data on the same 150 farms. The main line I want you guys to look at is the second one from the bottom, the dark blue one. So from 2007 to 2013, average fixed costs went from $115 an acre to $182. That's labor, power, machinery, land building, and finance. So everything that's not seed, fert, and chem. So that means we need to grow more grain just to break even. And I still remember when we first went out on the road with Global Ag and canola was 14 bucks and everybody in the audience said, canola's never going back to 10 bucks. We're in a new realm. Gross revenue's up. Like they charge $500,000 for a combine now. We can't grow canola for 10 bucks. Guess what? Canola's 10 bucks and they now charge $700,000 for a new combine. They don't care, right? So the biggest thing is we have to realize our inputs are going up because we want to make more money, but but our fixed costs are going up in order to make that money. So what are the two things we can do? Well, one, you got to find a way to make more money, but you have more risk, so you got to handle the risk. And we really, really, really need to focus on fixed costs. Perfection versus logistics, productivity and efficiency. As I said, when I was at Texas A&M, one of the best conversations I had with Danny was, he said, how come you seed 24 hours? I said, nope. Southeast Saskatchewan, it's too wet, it's too cold, the land breaks apart in chunks, I can't get enough guys. I gave all the normal Western Canadian farm excuses. I was 5, 6 of them, right? And fast. There's no reason I should try it. So do you feel bad that the guys in North Dakota running 24 hours are beating you by $8 an acre on 10,000 acres? Kind of competitive, right? He said, you need to reframe the question. Kristjan, you are seeding 24 hours a day. How are we going to do it, right? Well, we might have to do some minimum tillage around the sloughs. We might have to get a second shift. We run 24 hours all the time now. It's just part of the culture. The crew looks forward to it, right? So we sometimes have to reframe the question, right? We used to call big profit years at M&P half tons and holidays. Right? You make too much money, you go to Hawaii, you buy a new Duramax. Trip to Hawaii costs $10,000, new Duramax costs $70,000, that's $80,000. You got 10,000 acres, your labor power machinery just went up $8 an acre approximately. Guess what? You do that 6 years in a row and your labor power machinery goes up $70 an acre. Does it matter when lentils are at 60 cents and canola's at 14 bucks? Nope. Does it matter when canola's at 10 and lentils go back to 26? Damn right it does. This is an actual farm, just another example. His inputs went from 80 in 2005 to 219 in 2013. However, if you look at his gross margin, this proves that all farms can have a negative gross margin, actually grow less grain than you had in fertilizer, seed, and chemical, right? This is one of the best producers I personally know. He had a negative $27 gross margin. Got to remember, he had a whole bunch of fixed costs to pay off after that yet. Look at his gross margin now the last 3-4 years. 333, 416, 382, 296. This guy's a rock star. But at the same time, his total fixed costs went from 102 to 205 bucks. They doubled. Do you think he has more risk if an 04 frost or an 02 drought comes through? He's using $219 of inputs and $200 of fixed costs. So his total break even is north of 425 bucks. Right around 425, right? And the same farm in 2005, his total break even was 180. 180 to 425. Do you think risk management is an important part of trying to be 5% better so you make the right decisions? Farm financial statements. Since I'm standing up here, I am going to say, if you're not on accrual statements, go to accrual statements. Cash statements run at a 2-year lag. You have no idea what's going on in your business, right? You could have deferreds coming in and all your income prepaid. You got $2 million in your account and you lost money this year. You didn't even know, right? Accrual statements take 2 or 3 years to get your head around, and once you have your head around them, it literally gives you a competitive edge against everyone else you're farming against. So that's my quick speech on it. To make them simple though, this is all accrual financial statements are. On the income statement, we have gross margin, what it takes to grow the crop. Yield times price minus seed, fert, and chem. We have what it takes to get the job done. I don't care if you own equipment, lease equipment, get it all custom done, pay your brother-in-law to do all your work for you. I don't care. That's what it takes to get it done. Lastly, what it takes to be there. We all need land and buildings to operate, whether we own it or rent it, or to tell you the truth, what it takes to be there tends to be a function of old and rich or young and poor. Right? If you own all your land, you can convince yourself you have less land cost. If you're young and poor and rent it all, you have higher land cost. I'd make the argument though, if you got 10,000 acres and $40 an acre's average rent, and you pay no rent on your own land, and your net income at the end of the year is $400,000, buy a pina colada and go to Hawaii and rent your land out. Because if you're not charging land rent on your own land, and that's all you're making for money, you could do no work and hang out with your wife and kids all day. Just something to think about. So we kind of went through this already. So seed, fert, chem, insurance, production times price is what it takes to grow the crop. As I said, what it takes to get the job done. This is really labor, power, and machinery, we call it. So depreciation, fuels, repairs, wages, overheads, but the main ones being depreciation, fuel, repairs, and wages, and then custom worker leases if you don't own your machinery. This is the second most important number, really close to as important as gross margin. Because as I said, we need to increase gross margin, that's what pays our bills, and this is our biggest bill that we can fix, right? Our machinery is something that management fixes, not Mother Nature. Cost of being there is, as I said, whether you own or not your land. I always like to throw this slide in because we see this all over. Everyone tells us by 2050 we need 100% more food, and 75% of this food must come from efficiency improving technology, and I would make the argument that a lot of it could actually come from farm management. So, as I said, we want to make more money, we want less risk, and I would really like a unicorn. So now we'll do some brainstorming on how are we going to get there, right? I think there's kind of four main ways. Biotechnology, obviously we all know what that is. It's in the media all the time, but it has obviously improved yields and productivity. Information technology, the measuring and monitoring of our data in order to make proper real-life decisions at the critical time. On our farm, one of the things we spend the most time on is perfection versus logistics. We want to be perfect, but can we be perfect and get all the stuff there at the same time and do it at the right time? So the more we can manage our logistical problem, the farther we can get to trying to hit perfection. Mechanical implementation and process control technology, so that's everything from auto steer to sectional control to being able to set our combines from our iPad so our operators don't actually need to be able to notice that, etc. And as you can see in bold, I think the biggest differentiator is farm management skills. So the gross margin in 5%. There's no right way or wrong way. Everyone has their own ways to try and maximize profit and productivity. This is just some ideas that I've picked up along the way from other producers and from our own farm in order for you guys to hopefully write something on your action list to go home and try, right? So as I said, cash can be a 2-year lag. However, the reason accrual is important is you must manage margins. How many people remember between $1,200 and $1,500 nitrogen in 2009? Right, a few people. How many people think buying $1,500 nitrogen was a dumb decision? Because a lot of people did it, right? Now, if everyone didn't want anyone to see them, they would put their hand up, right? The problem is it actually wasn't a bad decision if you went 100% sold on $15 canola the same day. It still made money. The problem is people unhooked the margin. They bought the nutrients because suppliers said, we're going to run out, you won't have any fertilizer in the spring. And then they sold $8.50 canola in September. Margin was unlocked, bad decision in that case. But it had nothing to do with the price of the nitrogen. It had completely to do with the fact we didn't look at margins, we only looked at the price of inputs. Hence why I say accrual financial statements. I wish producers, banks, accountants, consultants, insurance agencies, everybody required them. And yes, you can not like me for it because they cost more money and they are hard to understand for the first 2 years, but that's how much I believe in them. Bill Gates says at Microsoft his managers tended to overstate revenue by 7% and understate expenses by 15%. Do you realize that would make you like at least 22% more profitable because you're just lying to yourself? However, if you have 5 years of accrual statements to compare your budget to, it's really hard to lie because here's what we've done the last 5 years. So unless you can prove to me that we're going to do something significantly different, it's really tough to do that. Create leading indicators. I would urge guys to look at their working capital. You want your working capital to be 30% of gross revenues. You can take it of inputs if you want, but it's easy to do. Current assets minus current liabilities gives you the amount of cash you have to operate your business. Divide that by revenue, you want it to be 30%. You're going to look up Cole and Kleinfelter and you're going to say, Kristjan, but they use 20%. Yep, and I think we're going into, other than, obviously we have a nice little lentil run here, Durham run. I think we're going into 3 to 7 of the most tightest years in agriculture because we've run our costs way up and our prices are going to come down because what do we do as farmers when we have really good prices? We bring in more land and we grow more grain. So we build a bigger factory, and when prices go down, do we shut a whole bunch of doors in the factory and lay a bunch of people off? Nope. We just keep growing grain until somebody else wants to buy it. So I'm saying, why not have more working capital than all your competitors? So that when you get the phone call 24 months from now on, hey, 66 years old, I don't have a son coming home, I'd really like to get out of farming, whether we do a buy or a lease or whatever, it'd be really nice to have more cash than anybody else. Because what do downturns create? The most opportunities ever, because nobody else will do them. So if you have enough cash to analyze it and do it, when your competitors don't, it tends to be what catapults businesses into the future. As I mentioned, right source, right. I'm a firm believer in more inputs. However, I am also a firm believer in there's a right way to do that. So if your strength is agronomy, awesome. My strength is more business, less agronomy. So I have a really good agronomist hired and I trust him a lot. We figure out what our budget is and mainly we figure out our yield target and work backwards. And my budget seems to go up every single year because he wants to do more things and proves it to me. On-farm trials, I also believe in, I think groups like Farming Smarter and other groups are doing lots of trials too to help us analyze the data faster of all these. But do side-by-side variable rate if you're not doing it. Do side-by-side chemtrition, i.e. if your sprayer's going over the field, why is it only going over the field to kill weeds? Why doesn't it have fertilizer in it? Because it's something in your plants at that moment in time will be missing, right? And a plant is only as good as its weakest link. So whether that's some nitrogen or some boron or some manganese or some potash, the agronomist can help you with that, but you're making the pass anyway. Fungicides and seed treatments are two of the largest things we've seen huge incremental productivity on per cost unit. Sectional control, obviously, I think is getting to be much more implemented. I'm also a big believer in advisory boards and peer groups. An advisory board would kind of be a group of outside of agriculture individuals that you might meet with once a year to help analyze and assess your business and ways to get better. A peer group would be a group of people likely within your industry or with the same type of issues you have. So if you want to deal mainly in ag, get a group of farmers you don't compete with, meet with them a couple times a year, have an email chat. You guys are all having the same problems, and the more people that give ideas, the increased chance of fixing it is, right? Personally, I've done a few of those, and I'm probably going to move more into an entrepreneur type peer group. Because as I said, if we bring up Mother Nature sucks, she can hurt us all the time in agriculture, everyone just goes, yeah, let's have another coffee, right? However, if there's a resort owner there and he says, well, here's how I manage with Mother Nature in my resort in Mexico, they literally have policies and plans in place if it rains on what they should do in order to be more prepared for when the sun comes out. Do you think that would be beneficial on a farm? Right? We like to say that HR is a problem in agriculture, right? You can't find good people, except maybe in Alberta right now. Don't know if I'm supposed to say that. In Southeast Saskatchewan, if I talk to my John Deere dealer, my Subway, my co-op store, Bayer Crop Science, they will all tell me good people are hard to get, right? As farms, we like to do this little thing of, what's your favorite Bayer rep, your favorite John Deere mechanic, and your favorite part salesman at your local automotive store, what do they make? And I don't know what that number is in Lethbridge, but in Moosomin, Saskatchewan, it's $75,000 or $80,000. Average farm wage in Moosomin, Saskatchewan is about $20 an hour for a farm laborer. Say they work 2,200 to 2,400 hours. It's $48,000. Am I allowed to talk hours of Bill 6 right now? Okay. So 48,000 compared to 80,000. So is our problem that we can't get good people, or is our problem that we're cheap? And now someone will say to me, I can't afford 30 or 32 bucks an hour in wages, Kristjan. I'd make the argument that my $20 an hour guys cost me 34. It's just 20 bucks an hour in wages and $14 an hour in idiocy and repairs. Right? Everyone laughs, so everyone agrees. We have a little rule on the farm. Don't start a piece of equipment until you check the oil. Simple, right? Combine motor cost me 70 grand. I really don't want to blow one because someone's stupid. Guess how many phone calls I get a year when I go and zip tie all the keys on the farm to the dipstick? Okay. Do you know how hard it is to start a combine if the keys are tied to the dipstick and you haven't checked the oil? Like, unless you can hotwire it from the cab, it's impossible. Right? Hey, Kristjan, I'm at the combine. You're not quite here yet. I was just going to fire it up and get going. Everything's good. You know where the keys are? That's why I was phoning you. You checked the oil? Yeah, oil's good. You might as well take your lunch and go home, please. Right? Simple, right? But do we have a protocol in place that we need to check the oil? Do we sign a check mark to say, yes, we did check the oil. Here was the date. So when the motor blows that day and there's no oil in the machine, do I get to take your whole salary back because I pay you less than the motor cost me? No. Well, I don't, because I didn't tell them, right? If you don't have the checklist in place and the proof, you can't even have the discussion, because it's as much your fault for not training as it is their fault for not doing. Another thing on gross margin, obviously, is price. How many people in the room have spent money to go take an afternoon or a 1-day or a 3-day course on futures and options? A couple of people. Awesome, right? So price can move up, I don't know, 130, $2 a bushel a year pretty easily, right? And I do notice one of the normal trends in agriculture is there's a lot of guys that can go for coffee at the local input dealer at least 3 times a week. We can complain about Mother Nature. And if we love growing wheat, we can go to wheat seminars till we're blue in the face, right? Yet I talk to a lot of guys that haven't even separated futures and basis in a selling price. Like basis tells you when to deliver, futures tells you when to sell. You are what makes your farm, the manager. Spend some money on yourself. Right? Education. As farmers, we think Harvard's expensive. I had a 12,000 bushel bin of malt barley this year that because my guys didn't sample it good, I didn't mix it off right, and I had one bin, 12,000 bushels out of 350,000 bushels go feed. It's a small percent. It cost me $34,500 one afternoon. Do we think Harvard's expensive? They only pay 60 grand. They get to go for a whole year. Right? So policies and procedures and investing in yourself is worth every penny. Risk management. Here's where I'll give my little blurb on global ag risk. The old programs are focused on yield. Agrostability is focused on margin. It's just poorly understood. The reason I'm passionate about private insurance and why it needs to be a tool in our toolbox, does it fit for everybody? No. Does it fit for some people? Yes. Is it because long term I'm a little bit worried about government budgets? And I'm also really focused on margins, not on yields. So my son needs more tools in his toolbox. Therefore, I'm going to be part of it, right? And I'm sure Grant, the CEO, came with me today. There's a booth downstairs. Quotes are free. That's all I'm going to say. Quotes are free. Tool in your toolbox, just assess it. The other reason I wanted to talk about it is when you've got a yield-based program, so the biggest losses on farms, 2 minutes. Biggest losses on farms are actually in the years we make money. 04 frost, farm loses $500,000 because of the frost. The next 4 years, they lose money because they make bad decisions because they're scared. Right? Use less inputs, don't be as aggressive on forward marketing. So they lose more money in the next 4 years than they actually did the year of the frost. That tells me that we have a bit of an unhook or a de-link of our programs to how to be a good manager. I'm going to fly through some stuff now. Labor, power, and management, or labor, power, and machinery, as I said, the second most, but really close to the first. How can we be more efficient with the use of our capital? What we need to get it done. So LPM focus, you need to focus on efficiency. I would urge you to look at 24-hour shifts. Do they work for everybody? No. But if your neighbor's seeding 8,000 acres with an 80-foot drill and you're seeding 5,000 acres with an 80-foot drill and you both have $1 million tied up in the drill, he's beating you. His only thing is he has to try and do it as good as you do it. And I'll argue that he probably is, right? Auto steer, combine settings. We can throw out 2 bushels an acre just by not paying attention to our combines every day. How many people throw pans at least once a day or even a couple times a day as the weather changes? Pro Drive, we run Deere. I ran a test between myself and Pro Drive last year. That's where you set the combine to do everything itself, straight cutting wheat. Did 2 back-to-back day trials, and the combine beat me by 13 acres a day. Now, I would like to believe that I'm a better operator than most of my team members. So what's it beating them by 25? I had my best operator with the exact same efficiency settings in the combine beat my average operator this year in canola by 40 acres. I'm going to value your combine at $200 an hour. It's a big number. 40 acres over 10 days is 400 acres. If it rains, big deal. So I'm just saying, let's switch the mindset shift in labor, power, and machinery, not to, I want to work less, so I'm going to buy more machinery. Or my salesman says multis are awesome, so I should switch it because I love ripping the plastic off the seat, right? 2, no. I want to be the most efficient, proactive farmer in my area. I need to assess my numbers. So quick quote on LPM is, change is inevitable. So we have the old one, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I'd say that's wrong. I saw this quote in a school one time. The most dangerous saying in our language is that we've always done it this way. The true answer is, if it's not broke, you just haven't looked hard enough because somebody in the world is beating you at it. I think shifts and benchmarking and peer groups and advisory boards are all things we can look at to help. As I said, LBF is a function of age and equity in most cases. I'm going to skip this thought. Why do I believe in the 5% rule and why do I come do the odd engagement like this is I really want to empower young entrepreneurs in agriculture. Yes, that's my son, maybe not quite understanding manners in the field, right? It really pisses me off that in the world, agriculture and ag groups have this message that the public sees that we're poor and we need handouts. No. We're goddamn successful, but we need stability if we want the best minds in the world to get into agriculture and keep it going forever. So that stability is through farm management skills, through new programs, through new ideas, through a mindset shift, right? That's why I come out. I want a legacy on our farm and that the dirt And the financial statements are in a better point by the time I'm done than when I took over, so that my son or my daughter or some outside CEO, because my kids don't want to farm, can keep our farm name going forever. Lastly, I get asked lots about some stuff I read, so I throw that slide up last. And I believe Sean's going to tell me you have no time for questions. Yeah, I'm around probably till middle of the afternoon. So if you catch me in the hallway, no problem.